Hey, everybody. Hey, good morning, everybody. Let's everyone please take a seat so we can get started, okay? Thank you. That was crazy.
Good morning and welcome, everybody. What a great honor to have the governor, lieutenant governor, and secretary all here at one time to celebrate the tremendous success that we've had in Haverhill. I know there are a number of other elected officials that have come. I hope I don't miss anybody. I want to introduce them. The Governor Charlie Baker, of course. Lieutenant Governor Karyn Polito, you'll hear from both of them. They've been our partners, and they have done an incredible job for the state and for the city. State Representative Andy Vargas is here somewhere.
There we go.
Andy's been an incredible advocate for public house for housing, and thank you. State Representative Christina Minicucci, also an advocate for housing. City Councilor John Mitchison is here. And my good friend, the mayor of Waltham, came all the way up here.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah. She and I are tied as the second longest serving mayors in the state.
Hey, Mayor? Mayor? Why don't you come on up here?
Yeah, there's a seat right up here.
There we go. All right.
Mayor, Catherine Rogers. Catherine Rogers.
There we go. All right.
City Councilor Catherine Rogers is also here. And I hope I didn't miss anybody. If I did, pass your name up and we'll be happy to introduce you. Today's a chance to celebrate, and it's really a culmination of 20 years of progress in the city, accelerated over the last 8 years with the Baker administration. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about where we started and how we got to where we are today. When I started, almost none of what you see downtown was there. On this site was a Woolworth building that had been abandoned for 50 years. The Haverhill Heights building down the street, that magnificent 10-story building, was an unused parking lot. The boardwalk out back wasn't there. There was an unused street called Wall Street, of all things. And at the other end of town...
It was, in fact, a wall. Pretty clearly served that purpose.
At the other end of town, nearly all of the factory buildings were abandoned, run-down factories, abandoned for decades. So we decided to start there, and I saw Kate Racer here somewhere.
She's right there.
She was...
She's sitting in Catherine Razor's seat.
Kate was there when we started 19 years ago. We stood in front of an old shoe factory that had been abandoned for decades at Fifth Avenue Shoe. John Kennedy came there in the 50s, said it was the center of Haverhill, and we stood there under a tent because the building was unusable, and said this was going to be the start of the Haverhill Renaissance. And Bill Pillsbury, our great economic development director, kicked me and said, "Renaissance? What?" And I had a lot of doubts about it myself. But that's where we started, and we took advantage of every conceivable state program. We did transit-oriented development before the Romney administration did it. In fact, I had a little argument with Governor Romney about it. We were the first 40-yard district in the entire state. And all of the great programs set up over the years, we took advantage of every single one of them. Downtown, we looked at parking, and we reduced parking requirements. We rezoned downtown so that housing was allowed, so that we could have buildings like this. And then we rezoned several other times to make it easier and easier and easier. What happened was an incredible revitalization of downtown, starting in the west end, the other end, with Cordovan and Hamel Mills Lofts, a new restaurant district, a new parking garage, a new boardwalk, And then we were ready to start up here. And fortunately, that was about the time the Baker administration was taking office 8 years ago. Now, this street, the street that you're on today, is Merrimack Street. At one time, when I grew up here. This was a thriving mercantile district. But time had not been kind to Merrimack Street. For 50 years, Merrimack Street went downhill. The urban renewal was designed to make it better, but it made it worse. And for 50 years, leaders had tried planning sessions, visioning sessions, parking garages. None of it worked. So we introduced one of our developers, the Planning Office of Urban Affairs, and I know they're here today. Where are they? We introduced them to the Havel Foundation. They formed a partnership, and believe me, it took a lot of work. But they bought this building, the Woolworth building, and a number of other buildings, and that's hard. Site accumulation is very hard. And with the help of Representative Dempsey, our great rep at the time, we were able to get a MassWorks grant to build a boardwalk out back and to build this incredible building. The Baker administration came along and continued that program, and we were able to finish the project because of Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito. Then we received a planning grant. It's called the TDI Initiative. Now, the TDI Initiative was in its infancy.
Where's the fellow?
Dan Rivera's here. Hey.
How you doing?
Thank you so much.
I was not the TDI person.
Well,
But you kept it going for us.
Yes, we did.
the TDI Initiative was in its infancy when Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito took office. But they kept it going. They didn't have any, sometimes people come in, mayors, et cetera, and they want to start everything over. But they didn't. They kept the good things going.
We doubled it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we also increased it, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
No.
13, how many?
They sent us a planner named Noah Koritz, and they hired a company called Util to come up with a downtown plan. Now, there have been many plans on Merrimack Street, and they've all failed. But Util and Mass Development took a different approach. All the earlier plans talked about we needed more housing. But Mass Development said, more of parking. Mass Development said, you have too much parking. You have too much space that's unused. So we decided to put an abandoned parking lot out to bid, and the Lapoli project bid on it. And they built, using their money, not ours, it's the least subsidized building on Merrimack Street. The Lapoli companies built that magnificent 10-story building downtown. Sal Lapoli's here, and I want to introduce him, and thank you for being here. Now, today, our downtown plans have worked better than I could have hoped for in my wildest dreams. 13 downtown properties that were redeveloped went back on the tax rolls, and their assessed value went from $12 million to $132 million. Taxes more. We're going to do more. Taxes for downtown increased by $5.5 million a year. We added 1,000 new residents downtown, and by the way, only 42 of them were children. We hear every day we love education. We don't want any kids. But we were able to double our meals tax revenue. We have $1 million in meals tax revenue. And then we decided to take the next step, aided by the Baker-Polito Administration, and sell off the only parking garage in this end of downtown. Now, by then, we had so much interest that 5 national firms bid on it. And once again, we had a committee set up, and we chose the Lapoli Company to bid this. That development proposed by the Lapoli Company, which you're going to hear about today, made possible by the Baker administration, will dwarf every other downtown development. It'll be the largest, most expensive, most expansive, and most spectacular project in Havel's history.
And it's expensive.
It'll add 5 new buildings, a new parking garage, an outdoor food court, numerous restaurants, and a refrigerated ice rink. You're going to hear more about it today. That project wouldn't happen without the incredible partnership between the city, the Lapoli companies, and especially the state under the Baker-Polito administration. Our next step in the city are critical steps. It's our moral responsibility as elected officials to solve people's problem, and I can't think of a greater problem in the state right now than the problem of people who are going to be homeless because there's not enough housing. The answer is as simple as supply and demand. There's many things that we have to do as a city. Pass an ADU ordinance, pass an inclusionary zoning ordinance, and allow buildings like the one that Sal Leopoldi's proposing to be developed and to have this great development go forward. There's been no greater champion of more housing, particularly in gateway cities, than Charlie Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karyn Polito. So thank you. And with that, it's my great honor to introduce our senior partner in downtown development, the great governor of this Commonwealth, Charlie Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So both Lieutenant Governor Polito and I are fond of telling the story that when we were campaigning in 2014, we visited a number of mayors around the Commonwealth to just talk to them about what was on their minds and what their issues were, and most of those conversations took place in their office. When you come to Haverhill to visit the mayor of Haverhill, you get in his car and he drives you around downtown and talks to you about what they've done and what needs to be done going forward. And you and I spent a lot of time along this corridor when I came down to spend
Looked
time.
a little different back then, guys.
Yes.
Sure did. And I think in some respects that what I would call front seat view of what was going on that you could literally visualize made an enormous difference in terms of helping us understand what you were up to and what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go, and made it a lot easier for us to figure out how to be helpful once we took office. I also want to say, and I've said this before, that there were a number of people who thought it was an unusual decision that we made to put a mayor of a gateway city in charge of mass development, which most people thought of as kind of a business organization. I think our view was that putting somebody into the CEO's job there who really understood how to talk development and understand development and appreciate placemaking and opportunity with small and mid-sized cities across the Commonwealth who really could walk the talk and talk the walk with them would be a great decision. And Dan, everybody thinks it was a great decision. In fact, they think it was their idea. But I do believe, I mean, I keep hearing things like, I was in Lynn the other day with Dan, and the mayor there said exactly the same thing you did, which is a lot of people wouldn't have understood what we were trying to do here, different administrations, different circumstances. He gets it, especially when it comes to communities like this, which is exactly what we should be focusing on as a Commonwealth. So, Dan, I wish you the very best as you go forward. We will miss working with you, but I'm sure folks like these two mayors sitting in the corner here will really appreciate the relationship going forward. So I'm going to start with a few statistics because the mayor mentioned supply and demand. From 1960 to 1990, Massachusetts communities permitted about 900,000 housing units. From 1990 to today, that would be another 30 years, we permitted about 490,000 units of housing, which is obviously smaller. We've said for a long time that we think one of the biggest problems we have in the Commonwealth is the amount of housing we have and the consequences that come with that. And the Future of Work study that we published in the spring of 2021 projected that we would be short by about 200,000 units of housing over the course of the next decade. We've treated this as the existential problem that it is, and since 2015, through state and federal housing tax credits, we've invested more than $1.5 billion in affordable housing, which has resulted in the production and preservation of more than 22,000 units of housing, 20,000 of which were affordable units, and that's just the stuff that's been done by the folks at DHCD. Through the MassWorks infrastructure program, which we have really put the pedal to the metal on over the course of the past 8 years, we've invested over $700 million in public infrastructure projects throughout the state, and those have supported the creation of over 26,000 new housing units. The Lieutenant Governor is going to talk more about the one-stop program, which, done in conjunction with our colleagues in local government, we believe is a template that has shown enormous promise in our administration and will be a huge boon to housing and downtown development and economic development generally going forward. We were also the first administration, based on conversations we had with our colleagues in the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus, to create a home ownership program. And we funded that originally with about, you remember those conversations, right, Representative? They were really friendly and joyous and happy.
I had a lot of fun.
But that led to a reallocation of a variety of resources we had for housing to create a $60 million Commonwealth Builders Program. And the first 2 homes that were built and bought under that program were located right here in Haverhill. And that program overall, the $60 million, the original $60 million, is going to support about 500 units of housing. And we now have another $200 million that we got from our colleagues in the legislature. Thank you very much. Using ARPA funds to continue to build out and expand this program. And honestly, there's a lot of stuff we've done in housing, and I really appreciate the work that was done by so many people in this room to get us there, and so many others. But this home ownership issue, anybody who's spent any time studying federal housing policy knows that for decades, right up until the 1960s, and even beyond in some cases, federal housing policy was designed to make it very difficult for communities and people of color to access federal mortgage programs and other supported home ownership programs. And you combine that with a variety of zoning policies that were more state and local, and this is an absolute travesty that has to be addressed. And that's why we asked for $300 million in down payment assistance support. The legislature put 60 out there. It's a great platform on which to build. I certainly hope people continue to build on that platform going forward. But this issue around home ownership, which is the primary way most people build wealth in America, is a door that desperately needs to be open and stay open, especially in communities of color and for people of color, because this is not a door that was available to them literally for decades. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done in this space, but there's much more that needs to be done there. I do, while I have this group together, want to talk a little bit about the eviction diversion program that you all worked with us on during the COVID pandemic. We distributed almost $1 billion to landlords and tenants to keep people housed and in their home during the course of the pandemic. On a per capita basis, it was the largest program in the United States of America, of any state, and it provided assistance to about 120,000 households. And that is another one where, I say, Lieutenant Governor, I say this all the time, that this job fundamentally is about teamwork. A lot of people think governors and lieutenant governors sit up in their offices and do things, sort of like the Wizard of Oz. It doesn't work that way. This whole show, everything, is a team sport. And one of the best parts about that eviction diversion initiative was everybody on the team played to their absolute maximum capacity, and it made an enormous difference in supporting people here in the Commonwealth. And another thing that was a team sport was the work that so many of you did and many others did to deal with our exclusionary zoning policies that were state law here in Massachusetts, that made it almost impossible for communities to build new housing, which has a lot to do with why those numbers were so awful between 1990 and the present, and that was the housing choice legislation. It took us 4 years to get it through the legislature, but we eventually got it done. I don't think I need to explain to anybody here how it works, but for those of you on the live stream, in Massachusetts, you can have a housing project get approved by a majority of the elected body, and it fails. And I used to read those stories all the time and just lose my mind, you know. Housing plan gets a 7-4 vote out of the city council in Salem and fails. How the hell can you fail when you get a 7-4 affirmative vote for something? And the answer is you needed a 2/3, which with an 11-member city council is 8-3. It's even more complicated for a lot of the town boards because those are 5-member select boards, which means you need 4 votes to get to the 2/3. And I think housing choice over time has the potential, and it's been demonstrated so far in a number of communities where this majority vote is starting to play out, that it will have a profound impact on housing production going forward. And I wish we'd gotten it done in our first year in office instead of our 6th year, but better late than never. There's a lot of people who are going to speak here, so I'm skipping some of the stuff they wrote down for me to say. It was actually probably a lot smarter than what I have said myself. I do also want to say that we appreciate the work the legislature did on creating the transit-oriented program associated with the MBTA and the MBTA service district. I think that one has tremendous potential as well to nudge a bunch of communities into doing what I consider to be the right thing around transit-oriented development in their communities, including mine, Swampscott, which will have a transit-oriented development project going on there, which it was just interesting. Have an up-close and personal view to watch that one work its way through the process. And then the just final thing I want to say is how much we appreciate the lift that so many of you gave to make a lot of these housing projects and this housing activity happen. We have an amazing future possible for us in Massachusetts. We have so many of the key ingredients that are required to be successful and to provide great opportunities for the people who live here. And we have an incredibly talented and ambitious and aspirational collection of communities from one end to the other. But we have got to build more housing if we want to build if we want to give them the chance and the opportunity to call this place home, because they can find a home. And I think we've created an enormously powerful runway, and I really do hope and anticipate that going forward, people will really put the pedal to the metal on this one and build on so much of the success we've already achieved. And with that, I will turn it over to my co-pilot, Lieutenant Governor Karyn Polito. And thank you for all of your work.
Thank you, Governor. And I wish to also thank the mayor for that ride 9 years ago. And as the governor said, having the front row seat with my co-pilot here over these past 8 years has been the honor of a lifetime, to literally journey across this Commonwealth into your city halls, town halls, into your downtowns, your main streets, into the hearts and minds of the people of our Commonwealth that we all represent and serve together. It's great to see this packed room here in Haverhill, and I'm not surprised, but it has taken a lot of work over these 8 years to build up this team and to see all of you working so closely together. We are on a pathway to a lot more progress around housing production in the Commonwealth, which is necessary, important, not only for the quality of life for people in our communities, but for the future health and competitiveness of this Commonwealth. Before I get into some of the specific things I want to say, I want to give a shout out to Undersecretary Maddox. She led I don't even need to say what you did, but you led the eviction diversion program during the hardest of times for people and the most uncertain of times, and making sure that they could stay connected to their home was critically important. You did a fantastic job. Okay, so
Without having one meeting in person.
right, I know.
Yeah, right.
That's right. It really was.
So we need. So this is what I feel we have accomplished together in these 8 years. We completely changed the culture and conversation around housing and what that means in your community. For gateway cities, for rural Massachusetts, for suburban communities, we changed it. I just remember a lot of conversations around not in my backyard, not that kind of housing, no, maybe over there, but not here. And that's gone, for the most part. It's gone. And I think it's in some places more than others. We've come a long way on that conversation. A lot of the work that we did through the Community Compact allowed me to literally open up that conversation and develop that relationship with local officials all throughout the Commonwealth, including we have now over 1,400 initiatives in the Community Compact program that's been funded every budget cycle. Thank you to my colleagues in the legislature, $65 million later, of best practices. And a lot of those best practices had to do with housing production plans, like literally taking your plan off the shelf, updating it, and more importantly, thinking about your strategy in terms of the kinds of housing that you need in your community. Do you need to serve older residents who want to stay in their community but don't need to be in their single-family house anymore? Do you need an update to your downtown? And if you incorporate more housing, that's going to give it a lift and make it more vibrant. If you're a gateway city, doing what these two mayors are doing is incredible. It's transformational what's happened here in Haverhill over the last 8 years. I mean, did you ever think that the Haverhill Heights building was going to be as beautiful and special as it is? That's a building you'd see in downtown Boston, and it's here in Haverhill. It's incredible. So the communities are adopting strategies around housing, and they know that making sure that they continue to populate their communities, the kinds of people that want to live there, is critically important to their sustainability, their future success. Permits. So people, yes, permits. And that's where the zoning reform that hadn't been done in over 50 years, I'm not sure if Jeff Beckwith is here, but want to thank MMA and all the local officials for really standing up for housing choice. Not an easy task to get the zoning reform done. But projects, good projects, stranded, don't get built because they're not permitted. So you need permitted projects to get them built. And so that was a critical piece of it. And I would say just the way we've conducted ourselves and have done business with our partners here at this table, the nonprofits, Mass Housing, Kate, all of the resource piece of this. So you can have the policy in your community, you can have the permitted project, but you need the resources to get it done. And so when you have the public side working closely with the private side, you can actually fund these projects and see them move forward. And so we got so much better over these 8 years around that piece of it, and I want to thank all of you for helping us streamline and making it easier, more predictable around tax credits and stacks of funds that could bring your private dollars and leverage every penny to get these to move forward. And that is when we really got things cranking with the one-stop program, which is, I think, going to be baked into, hopefully, the culture of how we do economic development, downtown development, housing development in this Commonwealth for many years to come. It now incorporates 12 economic development programs, and there's a one portal prefaced by an expression of interest process, pushing the communities to really think about their applications and what they're ready to work on, and helping them put themselves in the best strategic position to be successful in that application process. Rather than what was happening before, you'd submit an application and then you'd be praying you'd get these dollars. They might come, they might not, and would throw your cycle off. And so one portal, one process, a whole lot of consulting and previewing by the economic development team to help you get to yes, which was a big part of how the governor and I thought about this process. If every community wants to do this, we got to get them to yes. And so reducing those roadblocks, reducing the time to get these projects through the process, and then coming out the other end with some funds to be able to get going and going forward. So this round, There were $450 million of requests in the One Stop this year alone. Thanks to the legislature, we had some money, but not enough to fund all those great projects. But we were able to get $143 million out the door to 337 local economic development projects. And of those grants, 7,000 new units of housing, 5,000 market rate units, and 2,000 affordable units. So those are the numbers just in this round alone. But you can see that the communities and all of you have become so much more professional and sophisticated and smart about incorporating housing into your economic development strategies going forward. What I worry about as we round out of office is the headwinds facing this Commonwealth. We're a high-cost state to live in, yet we have incredible opportunities for talent development, and employers want to be here, but they can shop around, and so can people. They can literally virtually work from anywhere they want. So what's going to tether them to Massachusetts? Being competitive around a housing strategy will give them choices, and making sure that we offer that quality of life that you touched upon, Mayor, in our communities, so that people can decide they want to stay here, even though it might cost them just a little bit more, because they do have access to great education for their kids, because they do have access to vibrant downtowns where there are great things happening, because they do have access to the beauty and wonderful outdoors and opportunities in this Commonwealth that give them that feeling that this is a pretty special place to live. But none of that just happens. It's not like magic, although we know Kate Racer brings a lot of magic to this process. This is intentional. So as I finish with the governor, that's the message I would deliver, is continue to be intentional about this and prioritize it and keep it highest on your agenda, because the housing is the key piece that will make sure that Massachusetts continues to be the home that we want for so many people, our kids, our grandkids, and so many more, to have the success and opportunity that this great state offers. So just thank you for allowing us to be part of this team, and we'll be watching on the sidelines of all the great things that you do. And the final thing I would just say, don't forget us when you're ribbon cutting your projects. Our phone numbers are changing, and we'll be getting kind of sad that you're forgetting about us. So don't forget about us. We'd like to see you finish your projects and see it and be there with you. And with that, I want to turn it over to my other partner in economic development, who's done an incredible job following the footsteps of Jay Ash. And I want to now introduce Mike Kennealy, our Secretary.
Well, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much. Great to see you all this morning. I know we call this a roundtable. In a lot of respects, it's really a celebration. And my message today is one of thanks. I want to thank our partners, and folks too numerous to mention by name, but I want to thank our partners in state and local government for their essential collaborations over the years. I want to thank my wonderful, amazing team, the folks from HED and DHED here today, who have done amazing work over the years. You're a joy to work with. I want to thank the folks that we like to call the housing family in Massachusetts, the folks from our quasi-agencies, the advocates, the community groups, the developers. It's an incredible group of people that, in so many respects, have dedicated their careers, if not their lives, to the simple idea that everybody in Massachusetts should have safe and stable housing that they can afford. And I look across the room today, and I think about all of our phone calls on how are we going to get housing choice done. And I think about 2 affordable housing tours around the state we did, 2 different years, 29 communities, 65 developments. That was next, Governor. We did what the Boston Globe called Housing Choice Palooza, which is 13 stops around the state to advocate for the housing choice bill. There were T-shirts made up.
I remember the one in Salem came with a beer.
Exactly. I think about all the time you spent with us to help us get MBTA community zoning right, and I think we did. And all the projects we worked on together, it has just been an absolute joy to work with all of you. And I can't thank you enough for your partnership, for your collaboration. And the governor and LG highlighted sort of what the outcome of that was, all the stuff that got done. But you think about the impact. And the impact is going to be over the next generation. There'll be more families that can build a life here in Massachusetts. There'll be more seniors that can stay in their community. There'll be fewer people at risk of being homeless. We'll have more vibrant downtowns. We'll have more home ownership opportunities. And we'll have a greater ability to develop, attract, and retain talent as we compete for investment and jobs and opportunities with lots of other states and lots of other parts of the world. This is big, high-impact work. It's been a lot of fun to work with all of you, and I can't thank you enough for your partnership over the years. And with that, I get to turn it over to my partner in all things housing, our great Undersecretary, Jennifer Maddox. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary, for your kind words and strong advocacy for housing across the Commonwealth. I want to thank Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for making housing and the work we do with communities a top priority for this administration. I have worked for the Commonwealth Housing Department for most of my career, so I can say with confidence that this administration has dedicated unprecedented levels of funding and attention to housing, and that we have never had so much momentum or resources to make a real dent in our housing for Commonwealth in Massachusetts.
Booyah!
I am so very proud of this administration and be a part of it and to lead this dynamic team at DHCD. Today, we are here to celebrate these accomplishments, but also to make an announcement about the most recent housing awards. And it is amazing to think that back in 2015, we only had one housing award in the summer. And now we're up
Seriously?
to... Yes, only one. And now we're up to 4 to 5 with more to come.
Jesus.
Yes. We've been keeping Kate very busy. So without further ado, I am happy to announce the 14 projects, all of which are production projects, bringing 790 new units onto the market, nearly all of which will be affordable for households at a variety of income levels. So please hold your applause until the end to join me in congratulating the following sponsors and projects.
We always say that, but we don't really think it's going to happen.
Acton Housing Authority, McManus Manor in Acton. Benai Bereith, 1201 River Street in Hyde Park. Hack and Poa, Cape View Way in Bourne. Metro West Collaborative Development, Inc., 62 Packard in Hudson. YMCA of Greater Newburyport, YMCA Residences at Ingalls Court in Methuen. Alinea Capital Partners, 10 at 8th Street in New Bedford. Home City Development, Inc., Amethyst Brook Apartments in Pelham. Regan Development Corporation, White Terrace in Pittsfield. North Shore Community Development Coalition. Salem Schools in Salem. Wind Development, Point Hill Farm in Shrewsbury. Wind Development, Elm Place in Swampscott. Community Housing Resource, Inc., Cloverleaf in Truro. Two Life Communities, Leland House in Waltham. and finally,
I'm so surprised that Amy got
Amy.
and finally, Mitchell Properties, River Lofts at Cable Mills in Williamstown. Congratulations. So thank you for being a big part of this amazing ecosystem of developers and housing partners in Massachusetts who make these projects happen. And these are not easy. So I want to thank my incredible, dedicated team at DHCD and our quasi-state agencies who are essential to this work. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And now I will turn it over to Clark to get our conversation started.
Thanks, Jennifer. First of all, I want to thank whoever scouted this location because directly behind me is an MHP Finance affordable housing loan development. Bill and the mayor will take credit for that. Okay. Thank you. Secretary, I really liked how you framed this as more of a celebration than a roundtable, so we can kind of mix the two. A couple things to talk about over the next few minutes with the governor's team here, and I think this is all kind of looking forward. We've had some great accomplishments, sort of what's ahead. And I think the first place to start is the MBTA zoning law and housing choice, because I think everybody in this room knows, and the governor said it well, the difficulties with zoning and permitting have been the number one obstacle to housing production in Massachusetts and the number one driver of excessive housing costs. So those two pieces of legislation are absolutely essential for all the reasons that have been laid out. And now we're in the hard part. We're in the implementation stage. We have the opportunity at MHP to work with Secretary Kennealy and his team and DHCD on the guidance that took about 18 months to put together in final form. Just before Thanksgiving, what we're calling the compliance model came out, which is actually an objective, transparent way of measuring compliance with the new law. And now we have work to do with 175 cities and towns. And this is sort of an opportunity to kind of get some early feedback on how that's going, what the vibe is out there. For those of you who read the Globe every day, this is not just about a few towns that are not currently in compliance. This is about 175 cities and towns. And it's really important to note that as of this week, 80 communities have stepped forward and raised their hand and said, we're looking for assistance. They've either received a state grant of one form or another or will soon receive assistance from us or from other state agencies. We are basically at almost, and the number of communities, and Haverhill is a perfect example, that have a professional staff that don't yet need assistance, know they can ask for it and receive it. So we're in a situation now where it will soon be the majority of communities are already moving ahead, meeting this new legal obligation to zone for multifamily housing. And even though most of those communities don't have an obligation until the end of calendar 24 or 25. So we are really out of the gate here with MBTA zoning, for my opinion. But this is a chance to kind of hear from the ground, what's out there. And I would note that CHAPA, Rachel Heller, and Andy Vargas was a prime sponsor of the legislation, along with the two housing committee chairs. But I guess I'd ask you two first, how do you think we're doing? And deference to elected officials, representative?
No, representative.
All right, I guess I'll go. Well, first, before I get into MBTA communities, I first just want to thank the governor and the lieutenant governor for all your work on housing in particular. And I want to bring up a term that, has anyone ever heard of the term the Overton window? Raise your hand if you know what the Overton window means, right? It's this wonky political theory that says that in here is the realm of possibility of what is possible in our politics. And some people think that it's not on politicians or leaders to change the Overton window, but just accept the fact that this is the reality of possibility and this is what we can do. They rejected that, and they said, we're going to change the Overton window on housing, we're going to move it over here, and we're going to make housing production something that should be popular in this state, and that deserves a round of applause. And so I think that's a great example for whether you're an elected official or a leader of a nonprofit organization or municipality or just a family member that's having conversations about housing with folks who perhaps have NIMBY tendencies or aren't as educated on this stuff. We all have a responsibility to educate folks on housing because the crisis is so near and dear to so many of us. On MBTA communities, I was so pleased that got into the housing production bill that we passed, and thank you guys for running with it. We know that it wasn't originally a housing choice, but you took it and made it your own, and have been executing it to the full extent of the law. So thank you for doing that. I think it provides actually a good platform to do even more statewide, right? When we think about transit nodes that exist in Western Mass and Central Mass and other places, how do we make sure that those places are also, zoning for multifamily around there? So that's what I'm looking forward to next session is, focusing on how do we ensure that we get transit-oriented development all across the state. Maybe look at inclusionary zoning as a part of housing choice, lowering the threshold for inclusionary zoning as well to a simple majority, and other areas where we can build on the already fantastic work that's been done. But I really just wanted to thank you for your courage in moving that Overton window. Yeah.
Actually, another partner who's not here today, I just want to take a second, is our good friend Crystal Cornegay. So I brought a little picture of her, Governor, and you and her with after dinner, so she could still be with us today. And I just for her not to be here. She's been so key, along with everybody in this room, to making all of this happen. But I want to touch upon something. Each one of you raised such important elements of why this MBTA zoning is so critical. When you talk about zoning and you talk about redlining, you talk about our history, and this is actually making things more equitable. It is opening up these communities that have been left out. It is going to create opportunities for people to stay. This is the biggest change we have seen in zoning. I have a lot of favorite housing policies. This is my very favorite one. And on the ground, we work with communities through our municipal engagement initiative. We go and we help people build up coalitions, change the conversation like you were talking about, so they can see how housing fits into their bigger goals for their community, whether it's economic development, sustainability, like you talk about, Secretary, affordability. And we are seeing that there has been a change since this law has been passed. People are doing the work. The dates aren't until next year where communities like mine have to be in compliance. We are meeting weekly on this. We have brought in technical assistance. And CHAPA is supporting many of these communities. We're actually offering any community that wants it the ability to work with us and to work with each other and learn from each other as they go through this and think about how this new policy can be a tool for achieving so much for their community. It's not a burden. It's a good thing. It's something that can help. And so I do thank you for setting really strong guidance, being thoughtful about it, being intentional. This is going to change the future, and I'm really excited, and I think on the ground people are excited.
And I just turn briefly to Bill. There was a lot of effort, and it is too bad Jeff Beckwith couldn't be here today because there was very close cooperation with the Mass Municipal Association. I think a number of aspects of the guidelines, including some additional language on affordability that they cared a great deal about, made it into the final guidance. But
We had a big debate about it.
We had a big debate.
I know you did. I think you got to the
Thank
right
you for
place.
where you landed.
But from the point of view of a community that has been, sort of walking the walk all this time,
Sure.
but also having to deal with this requirement, how is it from your perspective?
Well, it's really important that we have the requirement because as much as the Lieutenant Governor said we've got it all, everybody's okay with the opportunity to create housing, we've got to keep our pedal to the metal because it gets very difficult in local politics sometimes when neighbors show up and when opposition occurs. We need to have the teeth in these regulations and these laws, and we've been as aggressive as anybody, as any community around the state in terms of creating zoning that is easy, that zoning that makes sense, zoning that's by right in many cases, and and that's what we need to do more of. But until we get we'd love to see inclusionary included in this package as well, because it's not going to be easy when we go to take it to the city council, because when we go there, we still need 6 votes out of our 9. So again, it's always a matter of keeping the pedal to the metal, even in communities that are doing a good job.
You only need 5.
For inclusionary, super.
Oh, for inclusionary, right, sorry.
When we change it.
Right.
But I think that's the point. I mean, we're as a community, we're ready to go. We're ready to bring this forward to our city council. But again, when we get there, we got to have the tools that we need to make sure that the people understand what we're doing is, the most appropriate strategy. And that's why we're updating our housing production plan. We're doing all those kinds of things all over again to make sure that we've got good information going into the debate when it occurs.
Thanks.
Clark, can I jump in quickly? So in MBTA communities, we do use words like mandate and compliance. But 2 other words are really important, which is assistance and partnership. We have an incredible array of technical assistance resources, Clark, Chris Clutchman, and others, to help communities get this right. And so I can't emphasize that enough. We're here to help.
And we have a lot of money.
We got a lot of money, too. Not as much as we want.
And that's a great segue, because the second thing looking forward here is, and Governor, to your credit, you asked for $1 billion for housing. From ARPA, you got half a loaf, a little less than half a loaf initially. In the bill last month, there was a little more of a loaf, but there's still some needs outstanding. And I would say,
I'm assuming the legislature's going to have to do an economic development bond bill because the bond part died, right?
Yeah.
So my assumption here is that that's going to have to be. Let me just put it this way: if there isn't a bond bill that gets through the process in June of 23 instead of June of 24, which is when we usually think about this, there's not going to be a MassWorks program in the fall of 23, which I'm sure is not something anybody in the legislature is going to want to see happen. So I do think that will happen.
and I guess what I would say is, 2 sort of immediate needs. One, the funding round today is an illustration that we have. What is it, Kate? For every application you're able to fund, there are 3 or 4 that you can't in a typical funding round, at least. I think that we have the pipeline. We have a number of projects built up, and there was certainly some money available for rental financing. We could use more. The other example would be with home ownership and home mortgage financing and down payment assistance, where there's an enormous opportunity to move the needle for buyers of color, and we've already seen that with the Mass Dreams program, and that money's moved quickly. There's a real opportunity. But I guess I would just, maybe I'll pick on Michael O'Brien here. Put down your phone.
That's a good line.
What's the
on your phone? Yeah.
What's the capacity if the legislature steps up and provides more? This is a moment in terms of state revenue and federal pandemic funding, a real opportunity to ask for funds that we haven't had for years for housing. What kind of opportunity is there out there around the development pipeline? If the resources are brought to bear, how much could developers like Wynn bring to the table?
In the spirit of the season, I would call it a Christmas miracle. But I would tell you the capacity's there. Our pipeline in Massachusetts, working together with the cities and towns and the neighborhoods and the citizenry, is deep. And it's in areas of need, many of those in gateway cities, leveraged by local funds, leveraged by historic tax credits, and ARPA and the rest. And so those additional dollars for ourselves, for Sal, go to work right away. Obviously meeting the high bar of all the programs and the legal requirements and the public good and public trust of those dollars. And we could unlock those and have those projects statewide underway. And it's 10 or 15 that we have in a current pipeline. But they wait the rounds dutifully. They wait the legislative actions and the bond bills to take place. And these are affordable projects. These are workforce projects. Very few units are ever dedicated to market rate. And so we would welcome the opportunities. And we work side by side with the Gov, the LG, the administration, the agencies, and working on those dollars to put them to work, including you, Clark. So, but I do want to go on record and be a little vulnerable here and just say to the Gov, the LG, the admin, and all the folks that work so hard on this, I love you guys.
So,
I think it's fair to say that a reflection of the pipeline. I'm not going to say. I mean, I love you guys too. We all go around. It's tough to follow. I love you.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at the oversubscription of HTIP, it's a perfect example of the pipeline.
Yeah.
That one still remains undone. We've tried twice now to triple the HTIP cap from 10 million to 30 million. And the demand for that is off the charts. Great point, Dan.
That's flexibility in gateway cities, really important. Really, really important. It works.
I didn't want to start a sore subject, but I did.
I'll back you up on that. Given you're a board member of NAIOP, so I'm happy to provide that. But just want to say on behalf of the real estate community that got involved in the housing choice bill and working and negotiating what could be in that bill, how we could bring everyone together to really push it forward and create a coalition that hadn't been seen before around housing. So, the realtors, the home builders, people who are actually out there building all the housing that is going to benefit from this, and those people who are putting those projects forward. I would say thinking ahead, the brownfields tax credit is also a huge issue for us. It expires at the end of next year. When you're thinking about that redevelopment, those blighted sites that need to be cleaned up from an environmental standpoint, along with HDIP, being able to leverage all these programs together is really critical. So a focus for us is the great runway you guys have supported and expanded needs to continue. And a lot of that has the potential to fall off next year in addition to the MassWorks funding. So I know from the developer community perspective, there is a lot of balls in the air right now that we do not like to see in the air in the first 6 months of a legislative session.
Yeah, that's true.
That's actually a really good point because time these days really is money too. I mean, we went 25 years without a lot of inflation. We're in a very different place about time value of money.
Yeah. Well, we actually need the housing bond bill right away too, in addition to another economic development bill. All of the housing programs need a significant boost. So I'll look to you, Representative. You'll get that, right?
The next administration.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. We've done it already. Since we're on the to-do list, the governor's sub-budget for the family shelter system
So I'm sensitive to keeping the governor on schedule. Any final thoughts from anybody at the table?
Clark, could I say one quick word? And that is, among other things, the Baker-Polito Administration has really distinguished themselves by their commitment to supportive housing for the most vulnerable residents in our Commonwealth. And the resources that have been made available and will continue to be available through the ARPA program are unprecedented, and I am very grateful for that. Thank you.
Well, you should give, I mean, the legislature, we proposed on that, the legislature delivered. So, and that is an unprecedented amount of money for something that's really important. So we're all in on that. I'm gonna close with a comment I made earlier because I think many of you reflected it in your comments. This really has been an enormous collaborative effort on a sustained basis, and I do believe the transit-oriented legislation and housing choice were the first two really big moves statutorily in a long time around trying to deal with many of the issues associated with production. We did get the biggest bond bill from our colleagues in the legislature. But we needed a lot of moving parts to come together to figure out how to put those dollars to work. And it's kind of cool that we're back to the point where we need another one. I think this is, as the Lieutenant Governor said, one of the biggest and most important issues we'll face. If we figure this one out and get it right and dramatically jack up our capacity to produce places people can live and incorporate a lot of the issues that we've discussed into that, into those efforts, there's nothing but opportunity as far as you can see here. This is really, in some respects, one of the biggest gating factors we've got. And to all of you, I just want to say, on behalf of the Lieutenant Governor and myself and the team, we have so appreciated the chance to work with so many of you on these really important issues, and we have made a ton of progress. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.